what about if I wanted to make these same chords for violin? Yeah, so I'm going to get rid of them from here because I just made a new version, and I'm going to realize it into guitar again, but I'm going to choose one of the plugins that we've used before, like eighth note arpeggios. And you'll notice that this gives a very boring shape. It's a bit low, I'll just move it up the octave. Alright, so this is perfectly playable by a violinist, although that's not. I'm going to make a new version so I don't lose this. Can you see that's not as effective, yeah? So there's two things happening here. One is that the violin is too close to the melody. The notes are clashing because the melody's lower than the accompaniment. In this case, I might change it to a viola. I can move the whole thing down the octave pretty much, although obviously not those ones. Let's see if that sounds better. And look, it's also too loud, so I'm just going to mark it PP. So the problem becomes when the melody notes get too close to the accompaniment notes. So I'd probably be just changing my pattern so that the melody stays well below, so that the accompaniment stays well below the melody. And if I ever end up with two notes in a row that are the same, I recommend tying them. Yeah, trying to make tie patterns is often a good idea. The other thing I think that's wrong with it is that it's too busy, rhythmically busy. So one way of overcoming that is to try and have a little bit of contrast. So while the violin has long notes, the viola could have some movement. But when the violin part starts to get a little bit busier, it would be better if the viola suddenly became boring. And so that keeps sort of happening. This is probably too much. This is probably too much. Can you see what I'm doing? I'm just changing by pressing the keypad. Where there's something like this, we don't want all this business going on. Yeah, so I'm just changing it to, in fact, in this case, I might even change it to a semi-breve. Yeah. Now, you might find you don't end up liking that note because that's a B flat and this is a C. So, you know, you can make actual changes manually as long as you keep to the scale. This is basically the arpeggio with some shape changes and some of the busy rhythms ironed out into long notes so that they're not conflicting with the melody. Okay, I liked that. There was a couple of things that bothered me. I think I would quite like to finish on a C, so I might tie those together. And I also felt that the viola was just carrying on far too much. It needs a couple of rests. So I think I might make that note into a crotchet to give it a little bit of a rest. And, particularly this note I thought was excessively long. And the other thing that strikes me is all the viola parts begin on the beat. Do they really need to? The melody's beginning on the beat in a lot of places. So, I'm tempted to just get rid of that one and maybe that one. You'll notice in Reverie there's a lot of accompaniment figures that start after a crave rest or a crotchet rest. Yeah, that's better, I think. I'm just going to make a new version. And I'm going to save the file. It'd be possible also to play the flute, or maybe even on the violin, but an octave higher. I think that might have a bit of an improved... The dissonance between the parts is less when they're further apart. Now, I'll admit that this bottom viola part is a accompaniment part. As you know, we sort of organised it originally from just realising the chords, but it's still music. So if I were wanting to finalise this, I'd probably want to put some sort of bowings on, yeah? Da da dum dum da da dum ba da dum ba. You know, some sort of pattern. Yeah, so we've been doing a lot of work on that in class. And the other thing I would be doing would be putting phrasing on the accompaniment part. And sometimes it'd match the upper part, and other times it wouldn't, because it might have its own little directional things. You can also copy dynamics from the top, Control C. So you can see how reasonably quickly I can get from a melody with no chords to a melody with chords to a melody with chord notes and start playing around with how the accompaniment part works. Now, obviously, I'd have to do that again for my other melody. I won't pretend that it's not a little bit time-consuming. There's no doubt about that. But I think that it is possible.